welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb here on Stadium Thursday afternoon. And make sure to scan that QR code on your screen to send us your videos and your questions. Give us a follow on Instagram at Watch Stadium. All right, Doug, yesterday was a big day because a bunch of guys got eligible, at least for the near term. Multi-time transfers, guys that had already been denied their waivers, are now eligible for the next 14 days after a big court ruling came down, impacting all these transfers, basically granting them immediate eligibility to everyone. So the NCAA put out this statement after the ruling came down. Quote, as a result of today's decision impacting Division I student athletes, the association will not enforce the year in residency requirement for multiple time transfers and will begin notifying member schools. All right, Doug, all these guys are now free, at least for 14 days until another, basically another decision by the judge late December. What's your take on all this?
What a crock. I mean, a judge wants a kid to play for West Virginia, so he strikes down a rule that the member institutions agreed upon. I mean, look, it's such hypocritical BS by a lot of these schools. You know, I mean, this really started with the Tez Walker thing at North Carolina, where you have Mac Brown, who pushed for this rule, North Carolina, who voted for this rule, then said, whoa. It applies to us? No, thanks. No, thanks. And eventually the NCAA, as they always do, acquiesced and allowed Tez Walker to play. I think this is a mass misinformation or disinformation campaign by many of our media brethren. That's what it really is, okay? When they say you can't play right away, they don't say you can't play. It simply means for the second transfer, you have to sit a full year, a year in residency. And by the way, here's the other part to it, which is really amazing. Okay? If you were to sit a year and get acclimated and improve and get ready, which has helped so many, myself included as a transfer. Okay, go back and track so many of the transfers that transferred up, down level, they sit out, they improve their game. And by the way, they assimilate to the culture of the new place. That also pushes you closer to graduation. And oh yeah, by the way, you can still transfer an additional time if you graduate on time. So what the judge in West Virginia did was help West Virginia basketball this year and create complete and utter chaos. And it makes it impossible to form a cohesive roster that has a high recidivist rate. You just can't. And oh yeah, by the way, while you help these players out, you screwed all the teams that passed on two-time transfers because they didn't think they'd be eligible. Okay? This all comes down to a judge in West Virginia saying, hey, I want the Mountaineers to form a better team, so I'm going to have one player play. What a crock. That's where we are. And by the way, it makes the NCAA essentially powerless. What can they pass that a local judge can't strike down so their school can have a kid? I am blown away by what we've done to college athletics. It's one thing to support kids and allow them to create NIL. Now it's become pay for play. Now it's become merely free agency. And oh yeah, by the way, you're destroying all the fabric of what makes it great. And you don't have to think that amateurism makes it great. That's fine. Okay. But when kids are playing at 4 schools in 4 years, what you end up going to do is, one, you really hurt the kid in the long run, because when you come back, there's nowhere to go back to, right? Like Hunter Dickinson's not going to Michigan as an all-time great. He's not wearing the Michigan jacket, Letterman jacket, and going to the Ohio State game as a former member of the Michigan Wolverines, even though he went there and left in good standing. Now at Kansas, if he wins a Big 12 title and gets to a Final Four, they'll still love him, but he's not really a Kansas guy, and that's the best possible scenario. So we are really hurting athletes post-graduation. We're making it very hard for schools to coach and teach culture. We have no desire to have academics in any way related to athletics. And oh yeah, by the way, we've screwed these schools that knew this rule or thought this rule would stick, and they passed on two-time transfers.
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, it's a complete mess right now because coaches don't know what to do. Like you said, so many of them were told by their compliance people who were told by the NCAA that these kids, these multi-time transfers, undergrads, were not going to be eligible. And I'm waiting for the day now this year, Doug, that a coach gets fired. Okay, a coach gets fired at the end of the season, and he sues the NCAA because what he says is, hey, you told me not to take these two-time transfers. I didn't take them. And in return, I got fired because I didn't take these guys. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to at some point. And now you've got coaches that don't know whether to, like, the Boone kid played last night for UNLV. They played him. But there's been no documentation sent out from the NCAA telling these schools, these coaches, that, yes, you can play them, and they're not going to lose the whole year. Because in 2 weeks, and I don't think it's going to happen, or, at the end of December, I don't think they're going to overturn this decision. But if they did, and these kids played 2-3 games, they might have burnt the entire year. These coaches have no idea because there's no actual documentation sent out to them yet by the NCAA on what they can or cannot do. It's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that's the perfect example is Caleb Boone. So Caleb Boone plays last night. Of course, he's a two-time transfer, right? And he had been at Oklahoma State, was his first school. He transferred. He gets to play. They beat Creighton. D-Dan Thomas, I thought, was the story. But remember, think about it. Like, this kid comes in, has 27 and 5, right? Like, well, how much of a difference does it make? A gigantic difference. And how many schools?
Yeah, this is the other Boone kid, Doug. It was actually the other Boone kid, Caleb Boone. Yeah, his brother. His brother was the one eligible yesterday. Caleb had already been able to play all year. But just to correct you, I know it's hard with those two kids being brothers. But Caleb
twins.
went to Pacific last year. Twins.
Yes,
that's right.
Caleb went to Pacific. They both went to Oklahoma State, and then Caleb went to Pacific. That's right. That's my mistake. But the point is that, like, again, imagine sitting there and you're watching. Musa Cisse as a player was at Oklahoma State. He's the best defensive center in the country, and he went to Ole Miss. And there were a lot of schools that wanted him. They're like, I don't know, two-time transfer. And now he was ruled eligible like 2 weeks before. And part of it is it's really hard to combat our desire to help kids with mental health, right? Because all of these players that have a waiver, I would say 95% of them checked off the mental health as the reason for their transfer. So, like, I don't know, like, how do you say somebody didn't go through some sort of depression? I actually feel sympathy for the NCAA. But the issue is that these are difference makers as players. And on some level, I actually feel bad for some of the players because these kids sat and now they miss 9-10 games into the season, and they got to catch up here over the next week, getting ready for conference play. So the whole thing is really a mess. And I understand that we have other people in our industry that seem to think, well, they got all the answers. Okay. But the whole idea of it being free market, there is no free market. There's not free market in the NBA, in Major League Baseball, in the NHL. Okay, those are unions. Okay, there are rules. They're collectively bargained upon. And here's the last thing. And this is a really important thing. That if that's what we're pushing for, right, if we're pushing for these players to be employees, and we're pushing these players to collectively bargain, they are going to get hammered in bargaining. I'm just telling you. Okay, professional athletes who have hundreds of thousands or millions in the bank, they at some point wave the white flag and give in because even though they have money, you got to make more money. You have college student athletes that don't have anything. They're not making anything. And what they don't know is tax man's coming. What they don't know is this is short-term game, long-term, they're not going to be making this sort of money. And like most deals, it'll end up really helping out the rank and file. And do you really think that players are going to sit if the negotiations don't go in their favor? Of course not. There's going to be all kinds of limitations, which will be legal. They'll only be legal if they're collectively bargained upon. Okay? And then, of course, the government, the tax man's going to come in and kill college athletics because the tax shelter that's been created will go away. The other thing that will be hurt, most likely, will be Olympic sports because the only way to do this is to remove the profit-generating sports from the rest of the sports. And if you do that, that's your way around Title IX. And oh yeah, by the way, if you have to pay the college student athlete and you have to pay taxes on all this stuff, there's going to be a shortfall. And the only way to cut corners is to cut Olympic sports, men's and women's. So that's what we've created. That's what the future is. That seems to be the only way, because the old system that worked for 99% of the people wasn't good enough for many of our media brethren. Okay? And now the kids get a little bit more. And we've created a complete and totally chaotic system where, I mean, like, look, you and I have done this for, how long have you done this for? I started in 2002, right? So 21 years.
Yeah, 20 years. 20 years.
Inarguably the hardest year to prepare for this year, because everybody has a whole new team, right? Everybody has a whole new team. And you have these crazy games. I mean, Creighton is the perfect example, right? Where Creighton's a top 10 team. UNLV loses to Loyola Marymount the other day, comes in and smacks Creighton. And why do you get that? Because you don't know what you have. It takes a while to build it and to put it together and to build it. And so you have these weird results, especially in November, December, and into early January, before the team is really formed.
So I'm waiting for the day, Doug, and it's going to happen. The portal was at its worst this year, and it's only going to get worse now if the rule changes. Because you're going to have a kid now who plays for a team on December 10th, and then they play against that player. He's going to transfer at the break, and he's going to play for another team against you on December 20th. You know, that's the biggest thing with all this right now is, again, chaos. Chaos, and the fact that the NCAA could have done something years ago, Doug, and they didn't. Even this past year, if they had said, hey, listen, either everybody's eligible or nobody's eligible, we're not getting into the waiver process at all, I'm not sure if somebody, again, a judge would have come forward. I think because of the confusion that Raekwon Battle, that some of these other West Virginia players maybe weren't eligible and other players in other schools were, I think if nobody was eligible this year, you might have been like, okay, you know what? No judge is going to get to that point, because, again, there was too much uncertainty. There was too much where, again, certain players, because they had better documentation with mental health, were cleared. Not because their situation was worse, but because they were more prepared for this. They had somebody around them that had better documentation, and that's why they were cleared. So to me, the NCAA is to blame for all this, because they could have made it clear, and they didn't before the season.
How? Wait. You're going to have to explain that. They
could have said no waivers. No waivers. None. Zero.
How can you do no waivers? How can you do no waivers? Imagine. Let me explain. Okay? Let me explain. Big bad NCAA that everybody hates, okay, which is really not some uniform body, okay? It's just the member schools voting, okay? But so let's take your thoughts on what they should have done and say, hey, no waivers, okay? Pick a player whose mom died. KJ Adams, his mom died, correct? Mom passed away a week and a half ago.
Sure.
Okay, so KJ Adams transfers, wants to play right away, and says, well, my mom died. So, well, there's no waivers. Like, you feel like you're completely heartless and soulless. There are players, and part of the documentation is, like, this is where it's all crap with the mental health stuff, okay? All of these players, especially the ones at the high major schools, they have access to mental health care. It may not be the best. It's definitely not the worst. They have access to it, okay? And the coaches are told by their athletic director, by their compliance, you've got to make this available. You got to make them know. And by and large, I can't speak to every one of them. Most of them do. Okay, so if you don't have documentation, that's because you did not tell anybody you were going through some stuff. And if you have documentation, it's because you went and sought mental health help, which is not that hard. So I'm going to disagree with you, because there is no winning for the NCAA. There's no way.
But you're giving them, Doug, you're giving them the one. You got your one transfer already, and you're saying if there's another one, yes, you sit the year. And if somebody dies in your family, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's the the funniest part or most ironic part about it is so many of these players that claim mental health, right? So if you're going through some stuff, I understand. Why not sit the year, get your grades together, get your game together, assimilate to the program, and kick butt your second year? I mean, go through the list of players, the Dan Dickhouse who transfers from Washington because player of the year at Gonzaga. Ask him if sitting out a year hurt him. Did not. It helped him, changed his body, changed his game, made him a pro. So we could go through all of these guys that did. I understand. Look, would I like to say that no waivers go through? Of course. But I think part of this is that the NCAA has been under siege. And to anyone who says, hey, they could have changed this a long time ago and allowed players to be paid, there is no amount of money that you can pay a player that will be enough. Okay? Let me repeat myself. There is zero amount. You can't. If you would have given them $5,000 back in the day, anybody wants $5,000 now is going to want $10,000. Anybody wants $10,000 wants $20,000. Right? So I actually think they've tried to do the best they can, but they're in a no-win situation. They went to their member schools. They voted by a wide majority to pass this rule. Okay? And it makes sense. Because, by the way, there's still a second transfer possibility if you graduate on time. All you got to do is graduate on time. Not hard when you're taking summer classes. It's not impossible. So this opens it up for 3-time transfers. This opens it up for complete chaos. And, oh, yeah, by the way, if you can transfer a second time, why can't you transfer a third time? Why can't you transfer a fourth time? Why do any rules apply? They don't. That's what a judge found a loophole. And, again, he didn't do it for it's not altruism. He didn't do it for all these poor. He did it because they think Raekwon Battle's is the best player at West Virginia, and it saves the in-state institution, which is part of the bigger issue where Jay Billis has been a proponent of paying players, of a complete open market system, and he says you can trust the schools. No, you can't. Okay? You can't. And the perfect example is this situation. Yeah. This situation where North Carolina voted for the rules. Then when Tez Walker comes up, they're like, this rule sucks. Like, wait a second. You just voted for the rule. How does that work?
Right. Yeah, West Virginia is certainly a team that is going to be altered here with Raekwon Battle coming back. Who knows if Omar Silverio comes in. Brandon Murray could turn Ole Miss into a fringe tournament team. They're undefeated right now, into a Sweet 16 team. Florida State gets a point guard in Primo Spears. Andre Curbelo, who started his career at Illinois, went to St. John's, now at Southern Miss. Cam Hayes at East Carolina. You can go on and on right now, Doug. The only one who played last night was Boone, and we'll see what happens here in the next few days. Big day Saturday of a ton of games. We're going to get to it next, but we'll see what those coaches do with these players right now because, again, there's still some uncertainty whether or not they're going to keep that year of eligibility. Coming up, there are still games to be played, and there's a huge one brewing in Indy. I'll be there, and we're going to break down that matchup and more next on Goodman versus Gottlieb. right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb Thursday afternoon, and we've got a huge Saturday, probably the biggest Saturday all season in college hoops, and it's highlighted with another top 5 matchup. We got number 1 Arizona against number 3 Purdue in Indy, Banker's Life. And this is a big, big game because, again, you've got an Arizona team that they've beaten Duke, they've beaten Michigan State on neutral courts, they've pounded Wisconsin at home, but now they go to a hostile area in Indy where there's going to be a ton of Purdue fans, Doug, and a Purdue team that's got the National Player of the Year in Zach Edey. So what's the key for Arizona to win this game?
I think tempo. I think tempo is a big thing. You know, they score 94 points a game, but they're also, I think this is a far tougher team than he's had previously. And I think really that starts at the point guard position. Their guards are more athletic. They're better defensively. They're big inside. So I think tempo, they want this thing going up and down. And frankly, Purdue doesn't like to play slow either. And then how they attack Zach Edey. You know, do they attack him with ball screens? Do they, because they can score in the low post, you go right to his chin? How they attack Purdue's specific style of offense and of defense, I think those are paramount. There's no real secrets in this game.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the one thing I'll say is Arizona's guards are big, strong, physical, right? Keyshawn Johnson, big, strong, physical wing. The key for me is going to be right. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, how do they handle that physicality, that toughness, and how much pressure is put on Zach Edey at the rim? You know, if I'm Caleb Love, I'm not settling. You know, I think you got to take it to Zach Edey if you can and make him have to guard and defend the paint. Sometimes I think, and again, I get it. I mean, 7-4. Sometimes teams are scared to take it at him. But I think the key for Arizona is going to be their athleticism, their guards especially, being able to overpower the Fletcher Lawyers, the Braden Smiths. And for Purdue, you know, obviously they got to make shots from the perimeter because what are you going to do? Are you going to let Krivas and Umar Ballo stand up toe-to-toe with Zach Edey? Probably not, because Edey, I don't care who it's been, he's going to foul him out. He's going to get him in foul trouble. So you're going to have to double the post there. And in doing so, you know, listen, for Purdue, that's been the issue, right? Like that was the issue last year in the tournament. They've got to make open threes.
I mean, listen, you got this is a very unique game, though. I mean, Ballo's 7 feet, 260 pounds. He's 21 years old. He's a grown man. So I disagree. I don't think you have to send multiple defenders at him. I think, you know, you got to push him off his spot. You know, you got to make him, instead of getting that little turnaround hook push shot from, you know, 4 to 6 feet, you got to make it 8 to 10 feet. You got to attack him when he's in the drop. You got to make him move. And then you're going to have to make some of those middies because he's going to keep falling back towards the rim, playing in the drop. And even though he doesn't protect the rim all that well, he's a massive body and does kind of protect the paint. So, and you know, look, both these teams are tremendous rebounding teams. They both average over 40 boards a game. And Purdue's not great defensively, even though reputation-wise, I think it tells you they're better defensively than they are. Part of it is they score so easily, the other team gets it back. But this is a Final Four caliber game. And you pointed out, because you asked me about Arizona, I'll tell you about Purdue. It does come down to, you know, you got those two guards. They're sophomores. They're both talented. They're improved from last year. But again, you're going against Boswell's played. He's not a fifth-year, sixth-year senior, but he's played a lot of college basketball. He's a grown man physically. And then Caleb Love's played a national championship game, and he's a grown man. So they're not crazy athletic with Arizona in the backcourt, but they are grown, they are physical, and they are far tougher than the Kerr Kriisa backcourts of the past 2 years.
Yeah, no doubt. Other than Purdue, listen, we know it's kind of a down year right now in the Big Ten, right? I mean, you know, Michigan State, they're under 500 right now. Maryland really struggled out of the gates. Michigan, after a fairly good start, they've come down to earth, and obviously there's a lot of drama going around that program. Northwestern loses last night to Chicago State at home, one of the worst programs in America. Right now it's like Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin are the teams that I feel pretty good about in the Big Ten. Other than that, you know, Ohio State, Yeah, they look good early, but they lose at Penn State. That's a game that you really got to win. Uh, how many teams do you see the Big Ten getting in the NCAA tournament at the end of the day? I think you may be looking at like 6.
6 seems like a high number. Tell me who that, like,
Yeah.
name me the teams. Now, again, I think a good portion of this is the changing times in the college game. These are not programs that are built traditionally to take transfers, let alone transfers that play right away. And they're not really programs that are huge proponents of NIL. It's not that they don't have some cash, but it's not like the SEC and not like parts of the Big 12 in terms of the resources allocated towards basketball in landing players. Illinois is probably one of the best, but I feel like they're better than their record. But then there have been some games in which they've had some bizarre outcomes. Maryland's the most disappointing one. Them and Michigan State. Michigan State, you're kind of morphing last year's team, which was good, with a whole group of freshmen, and they played a ridiculous schedule, and so they still probably don't know what they have. Whereas Maryland, you bring back one of the elite guards in the league, and then you bring back Julian Reese, Angel Reese's brother, who's a phenomenal athlete, interior player. They bring back 3 starters. They should be better. But how many they get in? I don't know, 4, 5. I mean, just tell me where the wins are.
You got to fill the field. But Doug, you got to fill the field. I understand what you're saying, but normally the Big Ten is like 8 or 9. I think ultimately you're going to get
it's
6
cyclical.
by default. Right.
Well, okay. I mean, like, we can do the math. The Big East is going to get 4 or 5. The Big 12 is going to get their usual probably 7 to 9, right?
Yeah.
The ACC, I mean, obviously a couple of, the ACC, you got 3 or 4, 5 now. You can say absolutely, you had Clemson in that mix, absolutely will get in. So I think the ACC been a little better. And look, the Mountain West, granted, San Diego State has had some losses and some disappointing games in the start, but the rest of the Mountain West has kind of picked it up. As you pointed out yesterday or 2 days ago in our quiz, they actually have the second best record right now of any conference in the country. So there will be bids. They just may not go to Big Ten teams. And as much as it's hard for us to get that around our brains, we should also point out that there have been years in which the ACC has only gotten like 3 teams in, no matter how deep that league is. It just goes by the given year, and this given year, Big Ten appears to be down. Michigan's not good. Iowa is down after losing all their seniors from last year, right? That's a surprise. And then, it's like, where are you going to get the quality wins if the teams don't have the resume to say they're a quality win? Even though we know, like, is Indiana a tournament team? No. Iowa? No. Rutgers? No. Northwestern, no matter how good that Purdue win, Chicago State at home crosses that one out, right? So they're going to struggle to get 6 or 7 teams in.
All right, so there's a picture going around of Juwan Howard and Tom Izzo at 5-star recruit Trey McKinney's game earlier this week. Everything seems fine for now, right? Looks good there. 2 guys just kind of, chatting despite what's going on with their teams. All right, the update on Juwan Howard, what's next for him in Michigan? How close is Tom Izzo to the end of the line for him? He's 68 years old. Let's start with Juwan Howard, Doug. And obviously, listen, if something happened, and I said this the other day, there had to be video of whatever happened with Juwan and strength coach John Sanderson. My guess is they looked at the video, and if something happened where they felt like Juwan Howard hit John Sanderson, did anything egregious over the line, there's no way Juwan Howard would be out recruiting. There's no way he would be coaching. They would suspend him, I would assume, immediately with everything that's going on around that football program. You're not going to take any chances with the basketball program right now. I think, again, this is something Michigan tries to keep everything they can in-house. Juwan Howard isn't exactly a media darling when it comes to college basketball. So I think Juwan Howard makes it through the end of the year unless this thing gets so bad or there's another incident.
I agree. I mean, you don't want to fire Juwan Howard, right? You don't want to fire Juwan Howard. And I think you get to the point where if you start throwing blows with your strength coach, now you get to the possibility of firing Juwan Howard. So I do think that they want him to finish. They want it to turn around, or they want him to find a soft landing spot somewhere in the NBA. If they can do that, that's probably the most desirable thing for Michigan if they're going to part company. But this is one of the things. This is one of the parts that's hard about hiring an alum, especially a historically great alum that comes from an era, is that it's not about hiring them. It's about how hard is it to fire them, and then if you fire them, do they ever feel welcome back on campus, even though they were the coach and they were a great player? It can be a tricky exit for people.
All right, Tom Izzo, 68, Hall of Famer, one of the best to ever do it. Brings back his entire team for the most part, other than, Joey House was important, as we see now. They're 4-5 now after losing to Nebraska. They play in Detroit against Baylor this weekend. Has he lost this fastball, Doug? Is this it? Should I say no? I say Tom Izzo still. He's got to go to the portal this year. There's no question about it. He's got
why does he have to go to the portal? Why does he have to go to the portal?
To get a 5-man. Like you can't stick with what you have at the 5-man spot. Go get a 5-man,
okay.
And this is different. If you've got a 5-man who can score, Doug, they're not 4-5, they're 6-3.
We're putting it all on Manny Sissoko. Like that's the whole reason that they haven't been good. Their guards haven't been good enough. I mean, look, he's got some future answers in that freshman recruiting class. So do I think they all stay? No, they never all stay. But he's got some answers there in the future. Does he need a 5? Can he go to the portal? Yes. But when you said go to the portal, I thought you mean he needs a whole new team. They need a whole new team. Has he lost his fastball? No, I don't think so. I mean, actually, if you watch them play, they've evolved a lot offensively. I've always thought he overcoaches a little bit in terms of end of game, calling timeout, come out, run a set. But the sets are more NBA style. They have opened up the offense. They just don't have good enough players. They just don't shoot it well enough. And some of that is in your recruiting, in not just recruiting the best athlete, but also recruiting the guy who fits the best, recruiting more shooting and skill as opposed to pure athleticism. Look, Cohen Carr's a great kid, and everybody was excited about him coming there, but he doesn't have enough basketball skill to play at this point in time, that they have to play him at the 5, and they put him in the corner, and he runs to the rim anytime somebody drives to get an alley-oop or get a tip dunk, right? So, but I think those freshmen will improve. I'm not canceling this season because I've seen Tom Izzo turn around, and I think that part of it is, like, again, there's a process in getting good. And these coaches, you throw all these different transfers, new players, begging kids to come back. And let's also be honest, they don't have the deepest pockets. Do I think they got NIL to get some of these recruits and keep some of the players? Sure. But some of the teams they play have better players than you can imagine because they have more NIL. That's really the reality of it.
All right, coming up, as the temperatures fall outside, there are some coaches who are feeling the heat. We'll get a temp check on some of those guys in just a few minutes. And for those football fans out there, you can watch tomorrow's Stars of the Game right here on Stadium. Be sure to tune in on Monday, December 18th for the U.S. Army Bowl. See football's best young talent on one field, and it'll be streaming for free right here on Stadium. All right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb. And man, Doug, the upsets keep coming here. There's been a ton of them lately. Last night, Creighton loses to UNLV. Northwestern loses to Chicago State. Miami and Texas A&M also lose this week. My take on this, it's finals. It's Christmas break coming up. And I think, again, listen, we've talked about it, right? The portal, all the other reasons, all the other factors still play in, right? You got the portal, you got the extra COVID year, you've got all these other things, and then you throw in the time of year as well. And I think you're primed to see some of these upsets, even though, again, like I didn't see this Chicago State Northwestern one coming at all.
No, especially the way Northwestern was trending. That one was that's amazing. But again, what you find is you'll find players that like I can't believe they have players this good. But the Colorado one isn't an upset in my mind. They're really good. That's not an upset of Miami, who's a bit disappointing this year. But it was the fact that it's a 27-point win. That's the stunning part. Not that Colorado beat Miami. It's the margin of victory. Memphis is just outside of the top 25, and it looks like they could add Naquan Tomlin. So it's not – it's A&M has been kind of all over the place in terms of some huge wins, some disappointing losses. The Chicago State one, that's like an all-timer because Chicago State is widely regarded as one of the worst programs in college basketball over the past 10 to 15 years since they went D1.
Yeah, give Gerald Gillian formerly of Team Breakdown in Florida, AAU program that he helped build with his brother Kenny. Give him a lot of credit. He's done a great job of, like you said, rebuilding what might have been, I mean, they're the final independent this year. They're going to the NEC next year, but that might have been the toughest job other than maybe the academies. Like some of those academy jobs, VMI, might be a little bit more difficult, but Chicago State's a tough job. He's done a hell of a job. All right, time to check in on some of these coaches, Doug, who came into the season on the hot seat and where they're at right now. And we'll start with Kenny Payne, who loses fresh off the DePaul loss at DePaul. They now lose last night at home to Arkansas State. And it was a mess yesterday because they had a junior college kid who hadn't played all year. They put out a statement that Karam was transferring. Then he comes out with a tweet and saying, no, I'm not transferring. And then they're like, all right, you know what? We'll put out the truth. The truth is we kicked you off the team. And Kenny Payne was actually trying to protect the kid, but ultimately the kid couldn't protect himself. And but Kenny Payne, listen, the future for Kenny Payne, Doug, I'm not sure he's going to be the head coach Sunday when Lorenzo Romar and Pepperdine come to Louisville. I'm not sure. I think it's that tenuous for him right now. And we'll see what happens, but there's a chance that Kenny Payne is gone here in the next couple days.
Well, I mean, like, look, if you lose to Pepperdine at home, who's not – they have a star player in Houston, Millette, who's tremendous. They're not great this year, and Lorenzo Romar at some point has got to win some games there, even though everybody loves Roe. As far as the Kenny Payne thing, it's pretty simple. It's not one thing. It's not just the losses. There's in a press conference you say that Mike Woodson, he tricked me. He played zone. I didn't know it was coming. But what was the other one? Then he tells the press that he played a player who didn't play in the first half because he didn't have the right tights. Two things. One, why would you out the player? That hurts you in your locker room and in the future. And two, why would you play a player who refused to play because he didn't have the right tights in the first half? Right? So, and then you have the losses, the press conferences. I pointed this out, Milt Wagner on staff. DJ Wagner goes to Kentucky, and I know his dad played for Cal at Memphis, but Milt Wagner got that job for one reason, and he didn't come through. It's just not good enough. It sucks because Kenny is a really nice human being. He's a really nice guy, but this isn't about nice guys, right? This is about wins and losses. Louisville's a program that is going to fire a great alum in terms of person and player because they're not winning enough, and there's more than just the wins and losses. It's the way the program's been run. But it gets really interesting. What's next for Louisville if, in fact, he loses his job, right? I mean, there's the obvious names, and then there's would Mick Cronin be interested? And you're like, well, why would you leave UCLA?
His buyout is too high. His buyout's too high. They're not going to be able to get him.
Yeah, I don't be surprised though if it gets floated, because Mick wants more NIL at UCLA. They're struggling to get to the top level, right? Could Billy Donovan come back to college? Right? If he comes back to college, there's a guy who's won a couple of national championships. The Chicago thing is not going well, and even though I'm sure he swore off college athletics a long time ago, I mean, that could be a guy. Who do you think, if you're Louisville and you got to make a call, who's your first couple calls?
Listen, I know who I'm going after. This is easy. This is super easy because, again, I'm not getting Mick Cronin because of his buyout, and I'm not getting Billy Donovan because even if Billy gets fired tomorrow, I'm not sure he's going to be ready in April to come back to college. I'm just not sure. I think he might need a year. Easy one, Scott Drew. Go to Scott Drew. He did as good a rebuilding job as there's ever been at Baylor, which we both know was a train wreck of a program when he took it over. And look at what he's done. He won a national title. They've got to the tournament 8 of the last 9 years. I know they're opening their new building. I get it. I understand that maybe he wouldn't move. But if I'm Louisville, I'm making him an offer he can't refuse. I'm giving him $9 million a year, whatever it is. He's a Midwest guy. He is the easy answer to that question.
I mean, I'm gonna ask a question, which, I mean, I think Bryce might be just as good a hire or close to as good a hire. He's doing a tremendous job at GCU.
What? You're crazy.
Yeah, GCU.
You're crazy.
I mean, look, do you really think that Louisville is a better job today than Baylor? Historically,
yes.
No question. Why?
Yes, it's a better job. Of course it's a better job. Well,
why?
Because of the resources. Because of the fact that they do care. Just because they've had a really bad run lately. And, oh, by the way, they were number 1 in the country 4 years ago under Chris Mack. And the whole Dino Gaudio situation destroyed the Chris Mack era. Now, he wasn't great there, but they had it rolling there for a while. Just because you hire a terrible coach doesn't mean the job isn't great. I say that about Georgetown all the time. They hired a bad coach in Patrick Ewing. It's still a good job. It's not as good as Louisville. Louisville is a top 10 job in the country. Scott Drew has made Baylor into a good job, but can you sustain it at Baylor long term like you can at Louisville? Can you fight for Final Fours every year at Baylor like you can at Louisville if you get a hell of a coach in there who understands how to coach, how to recruit, how to deal with people? Like, Scott Drew's got the whole package right now.
Listen, this is not is Scott Drew awesome? He's amazing. It's if you're Scott Drew and if you're at Baylor, you can have a bad year. And, oh, yeah, by the way, it's like, I understand. I'm with you in terms of historically Louisville's a tremendous job. Okay. It was also a job that for a long time, they had NIL before NIL was a legal thing. You go back,
sure.
Metro. But they're in a different weight class now in the ACC, and the ACC is very much in flux. You know, it just is like that. That league is weird now, right? You had these historically.
Where would you want to be though? But you want to be in the ACC rather than the Big 12. Like to me, get to the ACC. He can run that league now. Again, I don't know where it's going, but right now in Baylor, you got to deal with Kansas. You got to deal with Kelvin now at Houston. Like, I don't know. I just think it's time. If I'm Scott Drew and they offer me a deal of, $9 million a year.
Why? If you're happy and can he get to a Final Four with this year's team? Maybe. Did he win? He won a national championship there. Like, why? Listen, I understand that at some point everybody has a price point. You're like, I don't know if I can say no to that one, right? Because that's not my kids, that's my grandkids. He makes a lot of money, works for a private school. I don't think they have crazy NIL, but I think they're pretty well supported down there at Baylor. You open a brand new arena, which is only 7,500 seats, which is brilliant because it'll be full every night. It's been the only thing that they've been missing at Baylor. If you're happy, why? You're an hour from Dallas where all the players are. And I understand that at Louisville, you're an hour and a half from Cincinnati and you're not far from Indianapolis and whatever, but you're always going to be the second school in the state. And yes, Louisville is incredibly well supported. You play in an NBA arena. You have all the facilities. But, man, I don't know. I'm not sure I'd screw with Happy because Baylor has him in a truly, truly happy, good place.
No doubt he does. And he's got a hell of a game coming up Saturday against Michigan State. And it's that time. We'll talk about that matchup and a bunch of others when Doug and I pick winners on the other side of the break. Stick around. All right, welcome back. Goodman versus Gottlieb, and we finish the show today with some buzzer beaters and game winners. And let's start with the big boy game, right? 1 versus 3, Arizona versus Purdue in Indy, 4:30 Saturday. Who do you like? The lines aren't out for these games yet, Doug, but I gotta imagine it's probably going to be maybe Purdue by a point or a pick 'em. Who do you like?
I think Arizona's a better team. They've been the most impressive team by a good amount in these big games so far this year. It's in Indy, though. I feel like it's going to be an unbelievable Purdue environment. And I don't think it's a match. I think it's a very good matchup, close game. I think Purdue wins it in a close one.
I do, too. I think they make their open shots in this one. I think Lance Jones helps on those athletic guards for Arizona. You know, if they didn't have him, I just think defensively, he can provide some resistance to whether it's Boswell, whether it's Caleb Love. Those guys they're not long guards. They're big, strong, tough guards, which is kind of what Lance Jones is too. All right, UConn goes out west Friday night, and they play Gonzaga. Really good matchup. Stephen Castle's back now for UConn, talented freshman. The Zags are coming off a loss to Washington out there in Seattle. UConn out there out west against Gonzaga. Who do you got?
Man, I mean, you already mentioned Anton Watson, who's tremendous for Gonzaga. I like UConn this one. This Gonzaga team seems to lack a little bit of the star power that they've had over the past 6-7 years. I still think they're good, but I don't think they're elite. I think UConn is elite. I'm going to take the Huskies in the kennel.
Yeah, me too. I mean, listen, they almost won in Fog Allen, so I'll take them in the kennel because I think Kansas is a better team than Gonzaga, and I think they match up well against the Zags as well. All right, we got one in Atlanta, part of the CBS Sports Classic on Saturday. Again, these good games this weekend keep rolling in. Carolina against Kentucky. Veteran Tar Heels team against a young, talented Kentucky team that's been up and down. I'm going to take the Tar Heels here again. I'm going with experience. I'm going with Baycott. I can't wait to see Baycott against Aaron Bradshaw. And I can't wait to see more and more of Aaron Bradshaw, but I'm going with the Tar Heels here.
I am too. Also, there's that, can Dillingham go off and give you, 10, 12 straight points and keep you around? And I do think that they're going to struggle, Carolina will some, with the speed and athleticism of that backcourt, just the bevy of guys. But this is a skilled Carolina team. And I think in a game, if they can get it going up and down, they'll win. I do like Carolina, but I'm not, as I told you before, been really impressed with Kentucky and kind of the evolution of how Cal's played.
All right, Clemson, Memphis at Memphis. Clemson's 13th in the country. Tigers have been good lately. What do you think? Can Clemson stay undefeated?
I'd like Clemson to stay undefeated and win this game in Memphis.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow. Why?
You're not making a pick?
Yeah, I'm going to take Memphis. I'm going to take Memphis here. I think they win at home.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. All right, we'll see you next week. Goodman versus Gottlieb Stadium. Thanks for joining us as always.